Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Monique Harding Cordero, and I'm the Senior Program Manager for the National Kidney Foundation serving Greater New York. And I want to welcome everyone this afternoon to our first patient virtual session. And this session is covering a very important topic, information regarding the COVID vaccine. And at the end, we'll be taking questions. So I, of course, hope all of you will hang in there with us. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Dr. Kirk Campbell. Dr. Campbell.
Thanks so much, Monique, and thanks to everyone for joining in. And I'm joined here today by Dr. Gina Osorio and Christine Rubin, and they'll be giving an infectious disease and patient perspective regarding the vaccine. So I'll be starting off, and then I'll ask Dr. Osorio as well as Ms. Rubin to introduce themselves when they initiate their presentations. So I'm a practicing nephrologist at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. And of course, we've all seen the impact that the COVID pandemic has had on patients with kidney disease. And I'll be talking a little bit about the connection between COVID and the kidney and why it's important to get vaccinated. So with that, I'll ask Sean to advance the slides.
Be right there. Dr. Osorio and Christine, do you want to introduce yourselves?
So, go ahead, Christine. Go ahead.
So sorry. Hi, my name is Christine Garcia Rubin. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am a two-time living donor kidney transplant recipient. I have been a volunteer with the National Kidney Foundation for a few years. I did have COVID-19 earlier in the year, and I have been fine. I have gotten also my vaccine, so I'm fully vaccinated, and we can talk about that, I guess, a little bit later. But thank you for being here.
Okay. And Dr. Osorio?
Hi, guys. So I'm Dr. Osorio. So I'm an infectious disease doctor here in New York City. I've been here about a decade. I have been practicing around that time. I was the first COVID infectious disease doctor attending back in the spring of March. This is very personal for me, and why I'm very honored to be here in this discussion is my mom herself is a dialysis patient, and we will talk later about just the discussions that I had with both my parents regarding the vaccine. And I would be happy to report that myself and both of my parents are fully vaccinated. We'll talk a little bit more about that with our questions.
Okay. And we're looking forward to hearing some insightful comments from Dr. Osorio as well as Christine. So again, I'll be just sharing a little bit of information on COVID-19 and kidney disease. Next slide, please. So chronic kidney disease is, of course, a major risk factor for severe COVID-19. And we learned early on in the pandemic that having any of the listed chronic conditions, including asthma, hypertension, diabetes, and chronic kidney disease, would increase the risk significantly, right, for severe disease. And certainly having more than one of these conditions would have an additive impact on increased risk for severe COVID-19 disease. And of course, we know that patients who also are in closed physical contact, closed spaces and crowded living situations, and having longer exposure to individuals with COVID would be at higher risk. And of course, we know that having diabetes and hypertension is heavily associated, right, with the risk for chronic kidney disease. Next. And when individual racial and ethnic demographic status was sort of considered a little bit more closely, we could find that patients who are Black or African American had almost a 5 times higher rate of hospitalization. And similarly, patients who are Hispanic or Latino had a similar 4.6 times higher rate of hospitalization. And the rate of death was also significantly higher for individuals from these racial and ethnic groups. Next. We also saw an interesting phenomenon where there were patients with certain genetic predisposition, and this is one slide showing patients who have APOL1 risk alleles, which are very common in patients of African ancestry, and they got sort of a rare collapsing type of kidney disease that can have a very severe phenotype, progressing in many cases to the need for dialysis. So they're individuals in the bottom line, just based on their demographic background, that are uniquely susceptible to severe coronavirus infection and can get new onset kidney disease. Next. But overall, patients on dialysis, patients who've had a kidney transplant, certainly, again, and we can see on the left part of this slide, they are at higher risk for getting a coronavirus, and the mortality, right, from coronavirus is also higher. And of course, patients who have kidney transplants are on immunosuppression, so they are susceptible to more severe outcomes with disease. And of course, COVID can cause this multi-organ dysfunction, and the kidney is certainly one of the targets, along with the lungs and other organs throughout the body. Next. So just to sum this all up, we know that patients with underlying chronic kidney disease, patients with hypertension, diabetes, lung disease, are at increased risk for COVID-related disease. And of course, getting this acute kidney injury will increase the risk, right, of progression towards end-stage kidney disease and the need for ultimately dialysis or transplantation. So it's very important for multiple reasons for individuals to understand the higher risk that kidney disease confers to COVID-19 and the importance of vaccination. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Osorio, who will be talking a little bit more from the infectious disease perspective.
Hi, you guys. So we're going to go with the slides, if we could start. And I am going to alternate between Spanish and English, so if you have any questions, just let me know at the end. Go ahead, Sean. So they had me, so we're coming in to talk about COVID vaccination, so la vacuna de COVID. Es que estoy diciendo. So this is something that I want to just kind of start first, because all of us have had a different perspective, is what I always tell my patients. Everyone has had, different perspective this whole year, and it's been a challenging year for all of us. But just to kind of take a step back, it was just December 8th of 2019 that the first case of COVID was reported back in China. And it wasn't really until January 7th of 2020. So not, almost a year ago, or it has been a year ago, that COVID-19 was identified. And with that, the pandemic being declared a year ago in March 11th. And then this is more for treatment, but just knowing how much was done for treatment at that time, I myself was involved in a lot of the clinical trials. So this is remdesivir. This is an IV medication that we use for severe COVID for people who are in the hospital. And then just other treatments here, plasma being one that maybe some of you guys have heard about. And then I go into the vaccine. So vaccine, really the first one was December 10th, which was Pfizer vaccine was given what's called emergency use authorization, meaning that we were able to go ahead and give it because of studies that I'll talk about, or that showed why we can do this. And then Moderna received their approval or authorization December 17th. And then most recently, Johnson & Johnson, we'll talk about February 27th. And not just, just May 10th, we have now the Pfizer giving authorization for individuals 12 to 18. And in a few weeks, we'll probably hear about not just Pfizer, but Moderna authorization for even, kids younger than 12 years of age. So again, just kind of looking at what we've done in the year. And I'm just going to talk a little bit, looking at this arrow and the year that we've had, like what also has been happening with the vaccine during this period of time. Because the question I always get is, why was this done within a year? And I'll give you the analogy that I have when we're further down. So next slide, Sean. So es una cosa que, so vaccine development. So when we look at this, we look at the different, type of things that people think about. So one is polio, that some people may be familiar with, and how long it took for polio. So this was, around 1910 was when it was discovered, and when the vaccine is this blue dot here was actually created, so 1950s. And then SARS and Ebola, if anybody's familiar, these two viruses have very similar. And so some of the science that was built with Ebola, when we heard about this Ebola virus, some of that science was being used for the vaccine development as well for SARS-CoV-2, or this is COVID-19 as we know about. So this orange, is Ebola when it was discovered. And then the blue is when we are thinking about just when this vaccine development started. And here's what's very different, unique about SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 that we'll talk about. Next slide. And why is it that the vaccines take a while? It's just because, we're doing these different types of, I say regulation, but it's not regulation. Like, we're really trying to make sure that the safety and all little checks and balances were done. And just like you remember that arrow, that timeline that I just showed a few slides before, the genome, like the genetic material for SARS-CoV-2 was really found around January, which is around the time that, that the virus was discovered and the pandemic being declared here in March of 2019. And the clinical trials, which we are saying the studies for these vaccines really started right away in April, May. And a testament, so when I talk to my patients, I tell them, look, when this was happening to us in New York City in March and April, the same scientists, people that I work with, because I myself am also an HIV physician, the same scientists that work in the labs on HIV and other infectious diseases, they were all pulled to focus on COVID-19. So all of a sudden, we were able to get all these scientists, all these resources, all this material, all this money to be focused on something that was impacting the whole world, really, in many ways that we can discuss later. And so then clinical trials are beginning. And the other thing that happens with studies is why they take a long time is because you have to look at what is it that's being looked at. And in this scenario, we have a virus that's basically impacting everyone, and no one was really safe. It was impacting everyone. And, Dr. Campbell talked about just how, specific populations were more impacted than others and more at risk, and especially individuals who have kidney disease and are on dialysis. And so now we have a virus that's impacting everybody. And now we have the ability to even enroll people faster. So people were jumping to volunteer for these vaccine studies. And so what ended up happening is now we were able to get more information really quickly. So instead of years of trying to collect information, years of trying to get people enrolled into these studies and seeing about if the vaccine was number one, did it work and is it safe? We were able to have everything funneled in one particular virus. One particular goal is to develop a vaccine. And the ability of many people willing to volunteer to be part of these vaccines. And actually our clinics and many of the clinics at Sinai were enrolling patients, and some of my patients were enrolled into this study. And so what happened is that because we were able to do that, data came out, results came out, and as soon as those results came out, all of a sudden everyone was jumping for joy, because that result showed that not only Pfizer, but also Moderna showed that it was very effective to do what we want, which is basically to provide some protection so that individuals don't have very severe COVID where they're ending up being in the hospital. So that's kind of the timeline that I tell people. And I always give the analogy, like, think about building a house. If you wanted to build a brand new home, usually it can take a year, maybe it takes shorter for some people. But in general, it takes some time for you to build a home. But imagine that if you have all the money, all the people in the world that you want, all the materials, that home can probably be built within a week as opposed to a year. And that's similar, that I would say similar to the vaccine. And no safety checks were nothing got jumped over. All the regulation, which is what they're saying here, all the safety checks were all done during this time. And it was just what I mentioned about just having the ability to move faster because of these the things that I mentioned already. So next slide. So then what is going on with vaccine? We know about 3 that we'll talk about that are approved in the United States, but in actuality, we have multiple vaccine candidates. We have up to 319 right now. This is data as of May 17. So 319 vaccine candidates. Of those, 96 are in clinical testing, and we'll talk about the ones that were approved in the United States already. Next slide. And so which ones are approved in the United States? So this is Moderna. So Moderna, I mentioned the authorization was December 17th. Moderna and Pfizer here are both messenger RNA. So messenger RNA vaccines means that your body is able to now form proteins that then your immune system is going to fight or develop antibodies, so that these antibodies, in case you ever get exposed to COVID, allow you to basically fight the virus. And so Moderna and Pfizer both are messenger or mRNA virus vaccines. Authorization again, December 17th for Moderna, December 10th for Pfizer. Both require 2 doses. Moderna is 28 days apart for the second dose. Pfizer is 21 days apart. And as I mentioned, now it's approved for individuals above 12 years of age. And Moderna is still for above 18 years of age. And these numbers here mention how effective your body will, or your ability to be able to be protected against COVID if you were ever to be exposed. So after the first shot, it's 80% effective. After the second, it reaches 95% effectiveness. Then with Pfizer, you have 90% effectiveness after the first dose and 95% effectiveness after the second dose. And then Johnson & Johnson was authorized in February, and it's 1 dose, 77% effective above 18 years of age. Now, these effectiveness, what I usually tell my patients, really 100% of all vaccines that have been approved in the United States do what we want it to do, which is to prevent you from going into the hospital with very sick symptoms. Being very sick with severe COVID. And the other 2 vaccines here are vaccines, AstraZeneca and Novavax, that are in the pipeline. And you might hear soon might be approved in the United States as well to be used. Next slide. So this is, don't worry about the numbers and the graphs, but just look at this. So this right here tells you when the vaccine was given. So this is for Moderna. This is the second shot. And this is placebo, means these are individuals that these are people that didn't get any vaccine, and they may have just gotten something that looked like it was medicine, but it wasn't. And then this blue line are the people that actually got the Moderna vaccine. And what you see here is that really after 40 days after the first shot, you see that there's more cases of COVID-19 cases in the individuals that have placebo vaccine versus those that receive the Moderna shot. So next slide. And this is, next slide. So this is similar to Pfizer. So Pfizer, this is the first dose or first vaccine shot. Here's when you would get the second vaccine shot. And with Pfizer, you even see that the separation of these 2 lines. So the blue is the people that didn't get the vaccine, but what they say, the control of the test people. And then these are the individuals that got the vaccine. And you see right away that within a week or 2, you see this line where the people who did not get the vaccine are getting more cases of COVID-19. Next slide. This is actually information that just came out in the last few weeks. So my question was, has this information come out in individuals who were on dialysis? Because I would tell you the story about my mother. So my mother is, again, a dialysis patient. I was aware about the original results of both Pfizer and Moderna, and what I couldn't find was how many of these patients who were in these studies actually were individuals on dialysis or who had kidney disease, and there really was not that information. But talking to some of my colleagues and knowing myself that even the flu vaccine, if you think about the flu, we don't really get that information as well. But we know as infectious disease doctors and as physicians that really my mom or any patient who's on dialysis who's already going to be at risk if they get COVID, it's more beneficial for them to get the vaccine than not. So even before this was published a few weeks ago, I made the decision. My mom also agreed to go ahead and get the Moderna vaccine a few months ago. And so this study is for Pfizer alone. And Pfizer was able to show that with these comparison between people that had no kidney disease and people who were on dialysis, what they found is that the Pfizer vaccine was 96% effective. And as long as individuals who have maintenance hemodialysis, Pfizer vaccine is giving a same amount of antibody protection and protection against being able to have very severe COVID infection. Next slide. And what are the side effects? So the most common that I heard were really chills, like feeling like los galos fríos, como dicen, or muscle aches, or feeling really tired. And then headache. I would tell you that for me, the Pfizer vaccine, the first time I got it, I did have a headache. And then after the second shot, it wasn't actually the day of the second shot, but the night after, 24 hours later, that I started having a little bit of chills. And then the skin reaction you can get at the vaccine injection site. And this is seen more, I hear more from Moderna. And then bone aches and just, feeling like your bones are hurting. But the most common are really the muscle aches, feeling tired, and then the chills is what I hear from a lot of patients. And some patients, they don't have anything. My parents, they don't tell me a lot of things, but my parents never said that they had any side effects. Y so, que le está diciendo es que muchos de los afectos que me están diciendo las pacientes es que tienen calafríos, que les duelen los músculos o los huesos, o que nomás se sienten más cansados. Y una vez tienen como dolor de cabeza, y como está diciendo, la primera vez que yo gané el Pfizer vaccine, la vacuna de Pfizer, yo gané como dolor de cabeza, pero yo quería que maybe no estaba tomando café ese día. Y la próxima, el segundo vacuna, la próxima día gané los calafríos. Y para unas personas es nomás que el pie reacta con la vacuna. Next slide. So what questions have not been answered? So how long does the vaccine provide protection? What do we have in terms of kids less than 12 years of age? And do we need to be vaccinated? So muchas preguntas que no sabemos, que la contestas es que cuánto tiempo tenemos protección con la vacuna y qué pasa con los niños menos de 12 años y vamos a necesitar agarrar la vacuna otra vez, porque qué va a pasar con la protección y vamos a necesitar vacuna otra vez como en otro año. So esas son cosas que apenas no sabemos. But next slide. What I was able to find was this recent study that talked about antibody persistence. So after you got the Moderna vaccine, so this is the Moderna vaccine, how long did individuals have antibody? And this is up to 6 months of information. And what you can see, because these are different colors with different ages, what you can see is that the different colors, regardless of the different age groups, people had good antibodies up to 6 months. So una que estaba tratando de allá es que qué está pasando con el anticuerpo después que estás ganando la vacuna. So esta vacuna es Moderna. Y que vi es que la vacuna de Moderna, este es un estudio que nomás salió como en unas semanas, que están viendo que los pacientes 6 meses después de la vacuna de Moderna ya apenas tengan anticuerpo en la sangre. So, esta es una cosa que están viendo. Estás joven o tienes más de edad o más experiencia, que digo a mis pacientes, tengan anticuerpo hasta 6 meses. So, nomás es información de 6 meses, porque como te digo, la vacuna apenas tenemos información de menos de un año. So, ahí nomás están diciendo que de 6 meses de estos pacientes que ganaron Moderna, apenas tienen anticuerpo. So, próximo, so next slide. And so this is more of the personal. So this is actually my father, who, they're in Texas, so they had to do a mass vaccination with just drive-through, and this is him receiving the vaccine. And yes, this is me with one of my colleagues, and yes, I was in tears when I saw this, because as we all know, we all want to protect our family, and it's been a very challenging year for a lot of us. And as soon as they were able to get it in Texas, we were able to get my dad and sign up first. And I remember him telling him later, he got Moderna, which is what Dr. Fauci got, and he was kind of happy about hearing that, because he's a big fan of Dr. Fauci. And then my mom is here, and this is when she was visiting in New York City not that long ago. And the same that I was hesitant in the beginning about should she get it or not, especially since I wasn't here in Texas and being able to be with them. And right away, again, the benefits of getting it, as opposed to her getting really sick with COVID if she were to ever be exposed, because my dad still works at night at Walmart. And so I was, she thought, oh, he should get it because he's the one that leaves home. And I said, no, the thing is because he leaves home, you can be exposed. And so you need to get the vaccine as well. And so she was able to get it a few days after. And again, both of them are fully vaccinated. So, que estaba diciendo, este es mi papá en Texas. So, en Texas, cuando podían ganar la vacuna de Moderna, yo le gané una cita para él para que pudiera ganar. Y yo con una compañera de trabajo, y lloré cuando ganó la vacuna, porque como cada doctora y cada persona quieres proteger tu familia. So, cuando vi esto estaba muy feliz. Y estaba muy feliz también cuando le dije que ganó la vacuna de Moderna, porque esta es la vacuna que ganó el doctor Fauci, y es un big fan de doctor Fauci. Y bueno, esta es mi mamá. Mi mamá les dije que es un paciente de diálisis ya por 7 años. Me está diciendo a ella que ya son 7 años con el diálisis, y ella no sabía primero, yo estoy diciendo yo estoy diciendo nomás unos días, porque no era mucho tiempo que pensé esto, porque primero, como les dije, no había mucha información en los estudios de Pfizer, Moderna, de los pacientes que tenían problemas con los riñones o personas que están en diálisis. Eso no sabía qué efecto tenía la vacuna con las personas que tenían esos problemas. Y yo tenía estaba un poquito mortificada, porque como yo no estoy en Texas, ¿qué pasa? Mi mamá gana la vacuna y algo pasa, yo no estoy aquí. Pero ya como platicaron con los compañeros, yo dije, mira, el riesgo para ella que gana COVID y se enferma más si está en el hospital con COVID es más que ella ganando la vacuna y que gana poquito de protección y puede parar el COVID. Y al último, los dos ya tenían la vacuna, los dos ganaron Moderna. Y la primera vez podía visitarlos ahora, y estoy muy feliz porque los dos me dijeron que no tenían nada de afectos, pero no sé, porque como los padres no te dicen nada, nomás te digo que la cosa que yo sé es las personas con más experiencia o más edad tienen menos efectos. So what I was saying is that, my parents both said that they didn't have any side effects, but they are also parents, they don't tell you much. But what I would tell you that a lot of my patients who are above 65, a lot of them really did not report any side effects whatsoever when they got the vaccine, both of them, not just the first, but the second as well. So next slide. So with that, I just want to thank you. I think we're going to go over to the panel, and I will, if anybody has any questions that maybe in some of the slides I try to translate after. If you have any questions about any of the slides, I can answer them as well in Spanish. Just let us know. And at this time, I'm going to go and have Christine, one of our patients, be able to talk about her experience.
Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Christine, and I had my first kidney transplant in 1991, my second in 2006. I have been very lucky. I had 2 living donor transplants. So when COVID-19 happened, came upon us, I actually did get COVID. I luckily had a mild case. I spoke to my nephrologist. I spoke to the transplant team. And they felt that because I didn't have any respiratory problems or had any major issues, fever, that I should stay home because it might be worse for me to go to the hospital. After that, when I heard about the vaccine, when the vaccine came out, I was a bit concerned because there's so much information that goes around about the vaccine, who should get the vaccine, what the side effects are, that I did my own research online. And again, I spoke to my doctors. And that's when I decided I should get the vaccine because I'd be able to be more protected. You know, as a transplant patient, I'm taking anti-rejection medication. My immune system is suppressed. So I am extremely, as the doctors just noted, I was extremely susceptible to getting COVID-19, as I am for pretty much any virus. So I did go and got my Pfizer vaccine. The first shot that I had, I only had pain in my arm. The second one, I was a little tired, but overall, it was a positive experience. And my entire family also got vaccinated, so we're able to feel more comfortable being with each other and spending time together. So it is it's a decision you should definitely talk to with your doctor and see if that is something that you want to do. I hope you do. But I'm talking Spanish now for everyone as best as I can. So, yo estaba diciendo que tuve COVID-19 el año pasado. Afortunadamente no tuve que ir al hospital. Ahora, cuando la vacuna estuvo disponible, yo estaba preocupada al principio porque había mucha información sobre la vacuna. Hice algunas de mis propias investigaciones y hablé con mi nefrológico y decidí ponerme la vacuna y cogí la vacuna Pfizer. El único efecto secundario fue el dolor en el brazo y cuando tuve el segundo disparo me sentí cansada, pero gracias a Dios me he sentido lo más bien. Mi familia también, mis hermanas, mi sobrina, mi mamá, todos han puesto la vacuna también. Ahora, si tienes preguntas para mí, como un paciente del riñón, por favor, utilice el cuadro de comentarios y les puedo hablar más. Muchas gracias. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. Very insightful comments, and I see that we do have some questions coming in the chat, and we encourage you to keep those coming. So I'll just kind of field some questions for the panel. And there's one here. I'm 1 year post-transplant. Could the induction drugs impact the ability to build antibodies after the vaccine? So in addition to the current immunosuppressive agents, would the induction regimen that was started at the time of transplant, say a year ago, still have an impact in affecting the response to the vaccine? If you have any thoughts on that, Dr. Osorio.
I mean, that's been a question not just for people who are transplant recipients, but even people who are on medications for some rheumatoid, so like lupus, some medication, some diseases where you have to get medications that are basically kind of inhibiting your immune system. And the thing is that overall, most people and most specialists will say that at this time, it's more beneficial for you to receive the vaccine with the understanding that, yes, that your antibodies may not be as high as other individuals, but whatever antibodies your body makes, whatever these proteins that your body makes, whatever amount you have is more than what you have without the vaccine. And that ability, those antibodies are going to provide you at least some protection from getting very sick with COVID and being in the hospital, because that's what the vaccines are trying to prevent. They're also trying to prevent you from getting so sick that you end up in the hospital. Now, en español, sí, cuando estás en medicina, cuando afecta tu sistema inmune, cuando, yes, sí sé que la vacuna, los anticuerpos van a ser menos que otras personas que no están tomando estas medicinas, pero que estaba diciendo, ese tamaño que anticuerpo que tengas va a ser algo, porque sin la vacuna no vas a tener nada de anticuerpo, no vas a tener nada para protegerte en caso que tengas infección con COVID. Y con anticuerpo que ganas poquito con la vacuna, vas a tener poquito de protección para que no estás en el hospital, porque esa es la cosa que no queremos, es que ganas COVID y te metes en el hospital y estás muy enfermo con eso. So cada doctor apenas va a decir que sí, por favor, gana la vacuna.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I think that that's what we're seeing in the kidney literature as well, that both patients on dialysis and those who've had kidney transplants do seem to have a lower antibody titer when you measure the titer, right, in patients who've gotten vaccinated. But as Dr. Sur is mentioning, the titer level doesn't necessarily tell you all you need to know about how protected you are, right, against COVID infection. So even if the titer is lower than patients, who are not on dialysis or having a transplant, may still be sufficient, right? And that's the benefit that we're seeing in the clinical setting, that it's still effective in protecting, right, against serious COVID infection. So that's a key point. I don't know if Christine, you wanted to add any perspective from the patient standpoint to that.
Oh, well, I'm trying to think in terms of the injection. As you both said, the risks outweigh the benefit at this point. And again, you can do your own, whatever makes you feel good about doing it. There's a lot, you have resources, hopefully with your transplant, your transplant center, with your nephrologist. The National Kidney Foundation has a lot of information available as well. Just, read as much as you can, whatever makes you feel comfortable, talk to other people. But the benefits, I feel personally, do outweigh any risks. And thankfully, I have been fine. I see my nephrologist every 3 months. And if I have any questions, I, immediately go talk to them. You're your own advocate for your health. So absolutely do all the research you need.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much. And yeah, there's another related question, and it's, I think we'll read it in English and then we can also translate it into Spanish. So what is the effectiveness of the vaccine for kidney patients? I don't know if Dr. Soria or Raisha could translate that into Spanish.
¿Cómo funciona la vacuna de COVID y su efectividad para los pacientes con trasplante de riñón? No nomás trasplante de riñón, pero nomás los pacientes también que tienen problemas con los riñones. Es que yo decía también. Como le enseñé en la presentación, Pfizer tiene información que 96% está afecto la vacuna a las personas que tienen problemas con los riñones, y estas son personas que estaban en dialysis. So as I mentioned in the presentation, Pfizer did come out with information in the last few weeks, specifically though with patients that are on dialysis. So not necessarily individuals who have kidney problems, but with individuals who are on dialysis, the Pfizer vaccine was 96% effective with those individuals, and be able to provide some antibody protection after you get the vaccine against COVID.
Excellent. Thanks so much. There's another question. Are there differences in the side effects of the different vaccines available from the kidney patient perspective? So are we aware of any differences in the side effect profile, Dr. Soria?
La pregunta es si que existan diferencias en los efectos secundarios de los vacunas para los pacientes con problemas de los riñones. No que yo estaba viendo mucho datos los, I mean, sorry, I go back and forth. So not that so in terms of differences in side effects, I looked specifically for this information, and wasn't nothing reported differently in terms of side effects with the different vaccines. Like I mentioned, my mom and some of my patients who either just are, have chronic kidney disease or on dialysis, there was nothing different about what they reported in terms of side effects. Maybe more tiredness, but could have been just after the dialysis day. It's nothing different that I noted. That I can tell you. Y para en español, le está diciendo que mi mamá no dijo nada diferente que en los efectos secundarios. Y también yo estaba viendo mucho en el internet y todas las partes para ver y vi algo diferente, pero no que yo sé. Y también mis pacientes no dicen algo diferente, nomás unos dicen que maybe están más cansados, pero podría ser también nomás con el efecto de los diálisis y no la vacuna.
Right, and yeah, I think that's also what we've been seeing again from the non-infectious disease practitioner standpoint in our patients, that the side effect profiles do seem to be pretty similar. And I think the good thing is we do now have 3 approved vaccines, and folks are really advised, right, to get the one that's most readily available. And I think going forward, there's obviously a question regarding whether there'll be booster shots needed, right? How long the protection will last. But perhaps, Christine, you mentioned that you didn't have any significant side effects, but anything of note that you'd want to share with people who are concerned about being vaccinated if they've had a transplant?
I think just really anything that makes you feel comfortable, again, talking to your doctor, talking to anyone else that that has gotten a vaccine. There's a range of side effects. My mom, who is healthy, and my sister, who's, she's actually a doctor at Mount Sinai, she's very healthy, and they both were extremely tired. They were knocked out, and I was fine. So, so estoy diciendo que cuando recibe la vacuna, algunas veces mucha gente se siente cansada o se siente con dolor en el brazo, pero depende. Algunas veces no siente nada, y ahora si tiene problemas, seguro habla con su doctor, pero no creo que para mí no era un problema. So vamos a ver lo que pasa. Toda la gente son diferentes, so también habla con su doctor.
Thanks so much. And nice segue to this other question, right? After the 2 required vaccines, or 1 in the case of Johnson & Johnson, will people need to be vaccinated more in the future? Dr. Osorio, booster shots.
So después de las 2 vacunas, ¿se necesitan más para el futuro? Simple, yo creo que sí. Es la cosa que voy a decir. So simple answer would be yes. I think por muchas razones, mucho es que como se está cambiando various, como se dice en inglés, variants, maybe vamos a necesitar usar diferentes proteínas. Eso que pasa con la vacuna de flu. Cada año necesitamos ganar diferentes vacunas de flu porque son diferentes proteínas cada año. So simple voy a decir que sí, pero ahorita necesitamos más información, y yo enseñé un estudio que vieron las personas que ganaron Moderna y 6 meses después apenas tenían anticuerpo. Pero ahorita yo digo que sí, pero probablemente 1 año es que dice el doctor Fauci. So after the 2 required vaccines, I say simply, yes, we most likely will need it. Some of it has to be from just what we say variants, meaning that the virus is learning to just kind of change. And with that, similar to like the flu shot, the reason we get the flu shot every year is because it's different proteins every year that we're getting with the vaccine. I say Similarly, we may have to do that with COVID. And as Dr. Fauci says, most likely it's going to be in a year. One last slide that I showed at the end talked about Moderna's study, where they were able to look at the people who are in their study, what's going on with their antibodies 6 months later. And as you see, they still have a good amount of antibody, even regardless of age. Because people always worry if you're older or more experienced, as I said with my patients, that maybe you're going to have less antibody response. But with their study, they're showing that, right now, at least 6 months later in their study, people have sufficient antibody 6 months later. But I think some of what's going to happen in terms of needing a booster may be more because of just the virus learning to change and these variants that we're hearing more and more about.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And Christine, any concerns on your part as you're hearing this regarding the possibility of needing a booster down the line?
No, I actually, there was a report recently about the possibility. There was, someone was talking about antibodies, and so I was paying attention to it, but I sent that question to my nephrologist so I can see if he knows anything about it. And, as Dr. Gina said, we get a booster shot for the flu every year. And this will probably be the same based on what we're hearing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much for that perspective. Yes, there is a question here. We're providing, I'll read in English first and then you can translate. We're providing no information or some information affect the immigration status. The concern regarding reporting of immigration status, right, for patients who are appearing for vaccination, right? How do we answer the concerns of an individual, right, who may be undocumented and they would like to be vaccinated? We can probably translate before answering.
So en español, y dando información me va a afectar mi migración. Yo le voy a contestar en español primero. Que le voy a decir pues nada, es mi padre. En Texas estaban preguntando cuando estaba llenando la forma, decía, y naciste en Estados Unidos. Yo dije, ¿por qué están preguntando eso? Y yo dije que no, porque es ciudadano de Estados Unidos por más de 30 años, pero también no quería que algo pasaba y no le daban la vacuna. Y al último lo dieron. Y yo trabajo mucho con otra organización para VIH y yo les reporté y dije, ¿qué está pasando en Texas que están preguntando estas preguntas? Y ellos dijeron que no, número uno, no es algo que necesitan saber, pero también no es algo que estamos votando como en una agencia o algo así, so no te va a afectar. So in terms of providing information, number one, it's not going to affect your immigration status, your migration status. Personally, when I filled out the form for my father in Texas, they asked if he was born in the U.S., and I thought that was a really odd question that they were asking. And of course, I said no, because he's been a U.S. citizen for more than 30 years, but I didn't want to say something different, but I did hesitate in that question. And I even told him after he got the shot. I didn't tell him before the shot, but I told him after the shot, by the way, they asked this question, and I could see a little bit of concern even over the phone. And I work closely with an organization for HIV, the Ryan White Medical Providers Coalition. And I mentioned this to our advocates, and they right away said, no, this is being kind of shut down. There's no reason for anyone to know your immigration status, and there is no reporting agency that's been given. So it's not getting sent to anything, and they really should not be asking that information. And majority of times they're not asking now. I know New York at some point was asking as well, but definitely any information you're providing is not being reported to some agency to where it's going to affect your immigration status is what I would say. But I know it's a concern because I myself had that concern back in December, just from Texas and my dad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from the larger public health perspective, I think being vaccinated protects the individual as well as the community. And, regardless of immigration status, we want everybody in the U.S., right? As many people as possible to be vaccinated. So very important. Other questions? Yes, there is a question. Is there a chip or a tracer in the vaccine? there are some common myths.
So hay un chip. Yeah. So hay un chip por marcador, I guess, en la vacuna. So la vacuna es nomás la proteína que necesitas para hacer los anticuerpos que te dije para protegerte contra COVID. No hay nada metal o algo que es como que te va a afectar como un robot o algo así. Eso no es verdad. Es algo que alguien dijo y nomás estaba todo por internet. So no, there is no chip or tracer in the vaccine. What you're getting is something that's making you be able to form proteins so that you form these antibodies that are going to basically help you fight the COVID vaccine. There's no like metal or some chip device in there, and this is something that basically someone put out on the internet, and it just kind of took haywire, it went escalated. But I researched this because I knew this may be a question and my patients have been asking, and there is nowhere that this is even being said or anywhere in any of the material that I was looking at. I think this was just one of those things that was mentioned and unfortunately got escalated in the viral media that we have. I don't know if Christine wants to add anything.
Yeah, Christine.
No, I mean, I've heard the same thing. I mean, and a lot of other things. So, everything that you said, you're the doctors. There's so much out there, and I can understand how people get anxious and nervous. Absolutely.
Yeah, and of course, folks need to understand that the Food and Drug Administration really is the gold standard for drug approvals in the world. And I mean, you could see with the pause that happened with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, just to reevaluate the safety information, and then reassurance and guidance to physicians in administering the vaccine and what to watch for. So I think we can be pretty secure in the fact that these vaccines have been very well tested and scrutinized. All right, so for a transplant patient who is healthy with no other comorbidities, how effective is the vaccine?
So, para un paciente trasplantado que está sano sin otras enfermedades, ¿cómo está afectado la vacuna? Como dije antes, la información no tenemos como números, nomás te decía que tu cuerpo va a producir anticuerpos y esos anticuerpos no van a ser tan altos como otra persona, pero esos anticuerpos va a ser suficiente para darte poquito de protección para que no estés en el hospital con COVID-19. So as I mentioned before, yes, because you're on medicines that can affect your immune system, when you get the vaccine, you may not mount the same antibody or perform the same amount of antibodies as other individuals, but whatever antibody you do get is allowing you to have some protection so that you don't get severe COVID that you end up being in the hospital very sick.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we don't have specific numbers, is what I was saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's also a mention of the Johns Hopkins study. I'm looking in the chat, and my recollection is that one looked at the antibody titers, at least the one that was published after one dose. I guess there will be sort of longitudinal follow-up, and of course, that again, the take-home point is you can't always base the titer level and use that as the readout of protection, right? The titer levels can vary by individual depending on what medications they're on, other comorbidities, for example, dialysis status, transplant status, but doesn't mean that if you have a lower titer that there isn't protection, right? And remember, the titer level falls over time, but the protection remains. We've also seen that, right? That your immune system has memory, right? After getting vaccinated. So it is not a simple matter of high titer level and it's going to be there for forever, right? Those levels will fluctuate.
And as I was going to say one quick thing, as a transplant patient who has no other comorbidities, I will still wear my mask. I have a vaccine, but I will still wear my mask if I am in certain, if I'm in public, if I'm with people who are not vaccinated. So, that's a judgment call for everyone, but I personally will wear my mask, continue to wear my mask.
Yes. No, actually, like you said, and that's sort of the general. There've been updated CDC guidelines, but there will be a personal preference, right, and comfort level, and of course precautions depending on the setting that you're in, right. In close quarters, crowded situations, indoors, absolutely, masks are recommended. So I see we have just 4 minutes left, and if Monique wanted to come back on as we sort of wrap up. Monique?
Yes, thank you so much. So first of all, I want to thank our panelists for joining us this afternoon, this beautiful spring day. I can tell you I've learned a great deal. And I want to state for all of you out there who have gotten vaccinated, thank you. And for those who have not gotten vaccinated, I hope that what you heard today from our wonderful panelists will make you feel more informed and comfortable about considering getting vaccinated, because at the end of the day, this will allow you to do more things and feel more secure. So those are the comments I wanted to make in terms of thanking everyone who has joined us as well, and our panelists. Panelists, are there any last minute comments you would like to make before we close off? And each of you should close off with something. Yes.
Christine first.
Okay. I was going to say thank you. I also learned a lot. And I hope that everyone takes the advice of speaking to your doctors, doing your own research, and doing what makes you feel the most comfortable. And again, as a patient, the risk outweighs not the, oh, I said that wrong. The benefits outweigh the risks. So sorry. Y buena suerte a todos y que se cuidan. Y adiós.
Dr. Soria?
Yeah.
I'm glad that the mass debate was brought up, and I just thank you for this discussion that's much needed. And the thing I would say is, what I always tell people is, this is to protect you and provide you some protection that right now you don't have without the vaccine, but it's not to prevent getting COVID. I use the analogy of the flu shot. I got the flu shot last year or the year before, and I got the flu. So this is to protect, but not to prevent against COVID. And so thank you. Y para en español, le digo a todos que este es para darte, la vacuna es para darte protección, pero no para prevenir infección de COVID. Yo ya digo que yo gané la vacuna de flu unos años antes y apenas gané el flu. So, tal vez la vacuna es para protegerte, para que no estás en el hospital o en enfermo, pero no para prevenir el COVID, la infección de COVID. Y gracias por tu tiempo. Bye. Go ahead.
And Dr. Campbell.
Dr. Campbell.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. I think I've also learned a lot today, and I'm very heartened by the questions, because they suggest to me that there is probably more of a concern with how well the vaccines will work, rather than buying into some of the circulating myths like around safety. So, and I think that getting vaccinated is one of the ways that we can get back to some semblance of normalcy. It's been a difficult year and a half almost, and I think one of the ways that we can enjoy the summer and the rest of the year and get back to the things that we enjoy is to get vaccinated, encourage our friends, colleagues, family members to also get vaccinated. So that's my final comment.
Excellent. So to all of you, have a good afternoon, our panelists, and to everyone who's watching us and joined us, please be safe and join us for our next virtual patient session that will be in August. Have a good afternoon, and Te veo.